Hey, what's going on? Welcome back. Today I'm going to go over this guy here in the back. I'm just going to do a quick overview, go into a little more detail on what my plans are, what this car means for the Saleen build, go over some specs on this guy, some other cool like general facts about these cars, go over some of my future plans, whatever, and yeah, that'll be it. So the car is a 2004 SVT Cobra. It's obviously been in a wreck, as you can see, so it's got a salvage title on it, but like I said in my previous video, it doesn't really matter. I bought it for parts. All the good stuff's going to be going into my Saleen. I've been looking around for a while. I've seen some of these wrecked Cobras sell, and usually they're pretty high mileage and they're pretty trashed. So when this one came up for sale, I knew this was the one that I wanted, and when it came time to buy it, I didn't hesitate. So the biggest factors in buying this particular Cobra were, number one, the mileage. It's only got 48,000 miles on it, so relatively low for a 14, 15-year-old car. So finding one in relatively low mileage is, it's becoming harder and harder. And number two, just how clean the car is. Everything looks to be in great condition. It's not too modded, it's not too messed around with. Everything looks pretty stock and factory form, so I'm really happy about that for sure. There are some modifications, but nothing major from what I can see. So as far as the engine bay goes, the only modifications that I can see is the upper pulley and then the Steeda auxiliary idler, which is pretty easy to spot just because the cover's been taken off. It's also got an exhaust system on it. It's got a Flowmaster catback. It looks to be like 3-inch or so. It's also got a mid-pipe. I'm not too sure of the brand or what kind it is, but it's definitely been changed out. As far as suspension goes, I haven't really looked at what this car has. It looks like it's got the stock Cobra suspension on it. The Saleen already has like the racecraft suspension on it, so I might just use that for a little bit and then really decide what I want to do in terms of ride height and all that stuff. It also has a MGW short shifter, which is a really nice piece. It's probably the best short shifter you can get for these things. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not much, like I said, there's not much modified, which is awesome. All the wires are pretty much factory, they're untouched. Nothing's spliced out. It looks like the stock factory injectors. And then other than that, I mean, you obviously see it's vinyl wrapped gray. The car's actually a red fire color from the factory. Another thing is it runs and drives. It sounds great, it starts up every time without issue, no major leaks anywhere or anything like that, so upon initial inspection, it looks to be in really good shape. If you don't know or you're wondering like what makes these cars so great, well, it's right there, you're looking at it, it's the engine. I mean, the biggest thing with these cars is the potential they have. With minimal mods or bolt-ons and stuff like that, you can make a safe, comfortable 500 rear wheel horsepower. So the Saleen is obviously going to get the Cobra engine and all the stock factory harnesses. All the wiring and harnesses on the Saleen will come from this SVT car, which I'm super excited about because they look absolutely mint. There's no modification or splicing or anything like that. It's gonna look like it was like that from the factory, which is what I love. Obviously the car is also going to get the Tremec T56 transmission. I don't know if I mentioned, but I took the car around the block a couple of times and it felt really good. It drove really well. The clutch surprisingly felt great. One of the things that I wanted to do, just to save myself some work down the road was I was going to do flywheel and clutch and whatever, but I don't know, it feels really good. I'm going to obviously take a look at it when the time comes, but for now, I might just keep it. It's got 48,000 miles, it's not too bad. I don't know, I might replace it anyway, we'll see. The Saleen will also get the SVT independent rear suspension. Actually, that's one of the components I'm most excited about, other than the engine, obviously. And there's bushings and braces and other things you can add to the IRS to make it, a lot better than it is from the factory. And that's the plan. That's what I plan on doing. I think it'd be really cool to have an IRS on a Saleen with a center exhaust. different. The Saleen will also get most of the Cobra's interior. I don't know if I'm going to keep the seats. I'm kind of leaning towards fixed bucket seats. I've got Recaros in my other car right now, and I never adjust the seat. I always keep it nice and upright, so why not go with something fixed and lightweight? So I think that's the direction I'm going to go in eventually, but maybe for the foreseeable future I'll put the Cobra seats in and then, you know, swap them out some or whatever. I don't know, I'm not sure yet. I'm thinking I'm going to upgrade the K-member and control arms and all that stuff relatively soon before the engine goes in the car. I'm going to get like a nice tubular setup or whatever. Part of me wants to, you know, experience a lot of this stuff just stock, just to see, you know, just to kind of learn the progression of the car and learn the characteristics of how it was meant to be from the factory. But the other part of me is like, well, if you're gonna take it out, you might as well just do it in one shot, save yourself, you know, the hours of work down the road. So we'll see what happens. So these cars came with 390 horsepower, 390 foot-pounds of torque. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, oh, well, 390 horsepower isn't too much by today's standards. And you're right. I mean, there's cars nowadays like Hellcats and whatnot that are coming out with like 710 horsepower from the factory, right? But keep in mind, this is almost a 15-year-old car. And also keep in mind, these cars respond really well to mods, and they sound incredible. You can make some nice numbers. You know, 500 horsepower to the wheels isn't out of the norm. And then if you want to take it a step further, you upgrade the blower, the fuel system, whatever, and you're making, you know, 600 to 800 horsepower with ease. So just to compare those numbers to, like, say the Mustang GT motor, which a majority of these Saleens share. You have a 2-valve V8, single overhead cam, making about 260 crank horsepower, dynoing at, I don't know, say 220 rear wheel horsepower. You could throw a blower on it and they make good power, but you have to be relatively conservative, just because anywhere from 400 to 450, let's say, and 450 is pretty generous, but let's say anywhere from 400 horsepower to 450 rear wheel horsepower is pretty much the max for the 2-valve V8s found in the GTs. I mean, you're really pushing the motor at that point, really maxing it out. So there's guys that have blown them sub 400 horsepower. There's guys that have blown them around 440 horsepower, 420 horsepower. Some guys get like a good season or two out of them, and then they're just time bombs and they end up blowing. So those motors have pretty severe limitations versus a Cobra. That's not to say the Cobras are, you know, bulletproof and they're not going to blow. I mean, every car is different, but a majority of these cars can safely make 500 horsepower with minimum mods, and then, you know, you add a bigger blower, fuel system and whatnot, and you can push anywhere from, you know, 600 to 800 horsepower and still have the factory short block, which is crazy. But as the saying goes, you know, reliable, fast, or cheap, pick two. So that's how it usually works, right? Some other stuff that this car has going for it is the 6-speed transmission, T56 Tremec. Much stronger than what the typical Mustangs came with, all the different variations of the 5-speed transmissions. The fuel system is upgraded too. You have a dual fuel pump fuel system in these cars. It can handle some pretty high horsepower numbers. These Cobras also get a independent rear suspension. I know the IRS came on the 99 and 01 Cobras. They're definitely the most desirable IRSs out of the whole SN95 platform. The interior on these things are fairly similar to all SN95 Mustangs. There's a few differences, obviously. The gauge cluster is different. It's got this like nice illuminated display. The seats are a lot more bolstered and they got the nice suede inserts with the Cobra logos on them. So when these cars first came out of the factory in 2003, it was a huge deal, like for Ford. Back then you didn't really get these crazy horsepower wars like we have today, with all the different manufacturers making these 700 plus horsepower factory stock monsters. But for Ford, this is pretty much the car that kind of started that whole like program, you know. Shortly after the Terminator, you got the Ford GT, and then you got the GT500, the Shelby cars, all that stuff. So prior to the Terminator, the Cobras were pretty underwhelming. Like, there wasn't much going on with them. They were getting, you know, killed by LS1 Camaros and Firebirds and Trans Ams and all that stuff. One of the first things you'll notice if you're not aware are people call them Terminators. So the reason for that is while this car was being developed, the people at Ford actually nicknamed this project Project Terminator. It was like the code name for the development of the car. This was the first Cobra that actually got a supercharged engine. None of them were supercharged from the factory before this one. And it's easy for car guys to differentiate Terminators from other Cobras. If you say Terminator, then instantly a car guy will know you're talking about an 03 or an 04 Cobra rather than, you know, an 01 or a 99 or a 98 or whatever. So it's just an easier way to differentiate them. So these Terminators have a lot of cool stories to them while they were in production and just how they came to be. Basically, they had finished production of the 2001 Cobra and they were working on the 2002 Cobra. And while they were up in the canyons or the twisties somewhere, the story is that a Focus, an SVT Focus, pulled up beside, you know, this prototype Cobra they were testing, you know, and they started, you know, going back and forth a little bit. And John Coletti, who is the director of the SVT team who develops the Cobras, to his surprise, the SVT Focus was keeping up stride for stride. They couldn't shake it, and long story short, he was so disappointed in the performance of the Cobra that he took great strides in convincing the people at Ford to push production until 2003. So basically they spent that whole year revamping the Ford Cobra into what you see here. During that whole revision period, a lot of thought and revisions went into the engine itself. It got totally revamped. A lot of power was added through the supercharger. And when they added the supercharger, they were blowing motors left and right. So they quickly came to realize that the internals of the motor weren't up to par with what they wanted to do. So as a result, they ended up replacing a lot of the internals with much better parts. For example, the connecting rods are forged manly rods. You got forged pistons, a really good forged crank, a lower compression ratio, I believe it's 8:5, which is, you know, much better for boost applications, so you can run a lot more boost through them without worrying about blowing the motor. So the Terminators were like the pinnacle of performance for Ford during the New Age Mustang era. I mean, sure, you had the 2000 Cobra Rs, but as far as like easily attainable cars, like the Cobra was tough to beat, and just for its modding potential and just how powerful they could be. And the Saleens were no slouch either, for their time, obviously. In '99, the supercharged 2-valve, you know, was pushing well over 300 horsepower. And it was definitely a car you could have a lot of fun in. But I mean, everything changed when the Terminators came out in '03. So I feel like I'm combining the best of both worlds, you know? Like you got the more exotic styling and uniqueness of the Saleen car, and then you have like just the brute power and performance of a Terminator and the potential it has to make power down the road. Yeah, I feel like it's a perfect match, and it's something I thought and dreamed of for a long time, and it's really cool that I'm, you know, finally getting to do it, so I'm excited. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure many of you know all about the 03, 04 Cobras, or the Terminators as they call them. But if you didn't, I hope you gained some insight. The Saleen is a long ways away from any of these parts, you know, even touching it. But with this project, you know, I just want to take my time. I want to do things right, and you know, at the end of the day, be satisfied with the way, you know, things were done. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.